Hello and welcome to the Progress Theory, where we discuss how to implement scientific principles for optimizing human performance. I am Dr. Phil Price, and this is the Season 3 review. We're joined by Kult Media founder and the producer of the Progress Theory, Matt Cheney. And together we reflect on how we run our podcast, what our favourite episodes were from Season 3, and what you can expect from Season 4. What was your favourite moment or episode from Season 3? Well, we want to hear about it, so please leave a comment on our Instagram or on our YouTube, or even better, leave us a review on Podchaser or wherever you download your podcasts. Here is Season 3 review. Matt, how are we doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Phil. How are you?
Not too bad. Thank you for coming on and the Progress Theory, because this is the season review. And I know you've got a lot of questions for me. So I'm kind of looking forward to them. One, just to have a nice reflection, because we've had so many good guests on this show, and it'd be good to really take out those key messages that have really been profound for me. And also just my experiences, I guess, as a new podcast host.
Yeah, finding your feet. So how have you enjoyed it?
Exactly
This is Season 3. How have you enjoyed this more recent series? You've done 12 interviews, 3 performance reviews, and you produced 1 podcast trailer as well.
I think it's been absolutely great. I mean, as selfishly, it's been really good because I've learned so much, and I've really enjoyed the fact that we have got such a range of speakers onto the show. And from that, I mean, I have so many interests within the world of human performance that it'll be so difficult just to focus on one particular area. One, because there's so many different areas that are so interesting, and human performance is so multifactorial anyway. So just focusing on one area is not going to help if you want to try and improve your performance, whether it be a particular sporting event or just in general life. So I think that the season has been very well rounded.
Yeah, real variety of people.
Like, it's had certain episodes which are focused on particular topics, certain episodes that's focused on particular sports, and you can draw out your own conclusions from them. So no, I think it's been absolutely brilliant. And then I guess the performance reviews have been a really good opportunity for me to really reflect on how things are going. Ultimately, what I wanted from the Progress Theory was, okay, we discuss scientific principles and we discuss about how we apply them. But at the end of the day, like I said, everything's so multifactorial. You don't fully know that it's going to go well. So you need to have that reflection process to really truly understand, okay, I made this decision, this was my rationale for including this. Okay, if it didn't go to plan, like what went wrong, was it just the right application for the wrong time? You know, there's so many different things that can affect human performance. So yeah, the performance review has allowed me to be very critical of what I was doing, and ultimately that's why I wanted to do the performance review. I wanted to show that level of, okay, here's my rationale, these are my decisions, this is how it went, this is how I reflect, what would I do next?
Yeah.
Because I think that's a process that everyone needs.
But it's that learning process, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about learning from your mistakes and improving, what key things have you learned from, Season 1 to Season 2, now to Season 3 finale? What have you learned about podcasting?
Podcasting in general, like as in the actual of creating a podcast.
How's it changed over the last 3 seasons? So
just to give a bit of history for the Progress Theory, the idea was originally generated by myself and Freddie Reedhead. We had a conversation because he was doing a particular challenge where he was climbing to the stratosphere, but he was doing it in his house over his staircase. So that required him to go up and down his, as you do, that required him to go up and down his staircase for 10K. And we talked about, what he might need to do, what he might need to consider in preparation for that event. And then, when we got off the phone, we were like, that would have been a great podcast. We should have recorded that episode. And then it spiraled from there. We thought, well, why couldn't we do other challenges and then do similar podcasts where we talk about the training, we reflect on the training and talk about how we make certain programming or training decisions.
Yeah.
And then Freddie was doing a lot of work in Italy at the time for season 2, so he decided to take a step down, and we and Daryl Green got involved, and we had the concurrent training challenge. So it kind of took it to the next step, where we went into a little bit more depth around certain scientific principles and applying that to a particular challenge. So that was 11 weeks, a number of different topics, and again, it allowed to develop that process of, okay, science, rationale, training program, do it. How did it go? Reflect, change, all that sort of thing. How does that affect your perception on certain particular scientific rationales? So that was really good fun. I had a really good time, despite the fact that we did that marathon at the end, and my calf went, or it's my Soleus. Soleus went in kilometre 2 out of 42.2, isn't it?
Short-lived
So I
Soleus,
just limped around, but did it. So it was just a great learning experience. And on top of that, we had Matt Tyler for some of them, some episodes, because we decided to do those roundtables, which I thought were really fun, because it allowed multiple different people talking about a topic they're passionate about, but coming at it from different angles, because you've got Daryl and Matt are coaches, and I'm predominantly a scientist and academic. I coach, but not to the extent that those guys were. So we're going to have different perception of what a comfort
the theory
zone
to
is,
application.
for example.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's what I found fascinating, because you could have take us three, our knowledge in a particular area could be the same, but how we perceive that could be completely different. So how we then apply that into a certain situation, like a program, is going to be completely different. So you've got something the same, and then we've all gone our different directions from that, which I think is quite fascinating. And then that was season 2, and then season 3, that's when we got involved. We got involved with Kult Media.
The Magic Partnership. Yep. We've been producing... It's been interesting, isn't it? It's been good.
Mm-hmm.
I've enjoyed watching you flourish. What have you learned about interviewing people?
Flourish.
Yeah, flourish.
Everyone listens to podcasts, and everyone has their favourites. So it's like, okay, I particularly like that podcast. Why? And a lot of the time it was because of the host and how they made it conversational. So they took something that might seem like quite a complicated scientific topic, and then they've turned that through discussion into something that was much more easy to consume as information. And then because of that, you're able to if that's the case, maybe what if I applied it here? Or what happens if this happens? You start developing questions. And I find that really hard to do if the podcast is very interview-like.
Too formal.
Because then it's like one person asks the question, then you got like 5 minutes worth of someone answering the question, and then the host goes, "Oh, right, cool." And then they try and move on. Right? It's like, nah, come on, you can delve a little bit more, just, really get involved with the source material. And that's the way you learn. You pull it apart, you're critical, you asking questions. And I find that quite difficult in an interview format. So that's what I've learned. And then I try and gear some of the questions that I have by trying to set up the scientific description or rationales so that they're there ready for the guest to then package that into like 3 tips. What would be your recommendations? All of a sudden you've got direct short tips that you could potentially take out and apply yourself. So it's discussion of the science, pull out your conclusions with the help of the guest. Okay, now go away, use that information and be critical, put it into your training program, reflect on it. How did it go? That's what's been so great about this season, is that that's what I want our guests to do, because I actively do that myself.
Yeah. What do you think your biggest podcasting mistake has been?
Podcasting mistake.
Well, that's, we don't want to take them into series 4, do we? So I'm just trying to iron out the kinks now.
Yeah. I think my biggest mistake so far has been around maybe not allowing the guest to explain certain key terms, just to make sure that everyone that's listening is up to speed. Because you might have someone that's listening that has years of experience in coaching. Might have someone that's new to getting into running. Like, you want to have that information accessible to both. So if it means just taking a bit of time to allow, okay, what does that mean? Could you explain what that term means? Oh, for those of you that might not be familiar with this is what this means. That's probably the main thing I think I've got better at as the 12 episodes have gone through. There's a lot of skills that you learn regarding preparation. This isn't me just like writing a list of questions and then just like, okay, let's wing it. There's a lot of preparation that goes into this to try and make sure that you get the right messages.
When you're writing your questions, what are you looking for in those questions? What sort of outcomes are you hoping for?
I try and structure it in 3 parts, I think. First of all, I want to get to know the guest.
Yep.
So usually that means the basic introduction questions, tell me a bit more about yourself, and okay, you work in this area, or you have this business, you have this thing you're about to release. Tell me the background behind it. How did that come into play? So I want to get a bit of background so that the listener can understand why this is a particular passion for this guest. Then they'll have like the midsection where the questions are around the particular topic or scientific principle that we want to discuss. So, for example, with Dr. Luke Hughes, it was around blood flow restriction training, so around trying to understand the mechanisms behind that. For Adam Mattiussi, for example, it was more about trying to understand what goes on at the ballet. And then after that, it's more the application. And hopefully from the application, I can lead into those key messages that will be the like final questions. So it's, how do you apply it? Have you had any experience with it going wrong? What I like about that is the questions before set the scene, and then you can get the recommendations, but also that will allow the guests, I say, opinion or perception on everything to come through with those messages as well. Like, I know most scientists try and be as objective and as not as, I don't want to be biased, but you still want to see, you still want an opinion, don't you? Girl's passion. Yeah, exactly. You want an opinion, because your opinion can be, be laden with self-doubt. Well, we think it's this, but maybe not. But at least you have like a very genuine response from the guest. And I think the application type questions allow the genuine response to come through.
Yeah, it would be such a boring podcast if people just stayed on their side of safety and were like, no, well, we don't really have enough data. Oh, there's more research to be done. Oh, it would be so dull, so dross.
Those are all very important points regarding, not enough data, but you can still have a conclusion based on the limited knowledge that you have there, because then you're suggesting, oh, well, we need to do this to find out a bit more.
So let's find out a bit more. Let's jump into, where should we start? Let's start at the beginning. Episode 1 of this most recent series. We started with Loners. Loners. You've got yourself a little safety net there. Your first interview was with one of your best mates. Keeping it safe. Just keeping it nice and close in case, it doesn't go well. Tell me about Loners' interview.
Well, the Loners' interview was great, and I was always very surprised that he hadn't been involved with a podcast before then. So I really wanted to get him quick before we started, because he's such a charismatic guy and he has such a rich history and experience in coaching, teaching the lot. So I'm like, why has no other podcast picked him up? And then I saw another podcast had. I was like, oh, quick. So all of a sudden, Ben's services became very much wanted. But one of the key things that really stood out for me in that episode was his honesty around relationships within a team or a system. because I don't know if you see it on Instagram as well. A lot of people talk about the importance of leadership, communication, teamwork, and then you have people coming on to podcasts talking about the same thing. You know, what is performance to you? What is communication? What is leadership to you? And people's responses have become almost the same. And it makes me think, are people just reading from the same hymn sheet here? Is what people say in podcasts actually the same as what happens in real life? Because
or have they applied it?
Yeah. And then it was a really important thing that Lon said that made me think, oh, maybe there's actually a little bit more to this, because he started talking about, oh, you know, I've heard certain coaches, they talk about the importance of this, they talk the importance of this, and developing relationship with the people above, you know, in the same level, or the athletes that you're working with. And then you actually speak to the athletes and they're like, that person's a bit of a twat. You know, so where's the issue here? Is the issue that this person's on a podcast lying as to, or does he or she know what's important, but they're not actually putting it into place in a professional setting? Or are they just completely unaware? He perceives that what he's doing is exactly what he's describing in a podcast, but then when it comes to the real life situation, it's not actually working. So
that lack of situational awareness.
Yeah, that. And I thought it was fascinating, because it made me start to think, oh, how much is that? That must happen in a lot. There must be so many different people saying, you know, this is important, but who actually does that well? Does everyone perceive themselves at doing it well? Well, I'm a coach, so it's all about developing relationships, so I'm good at it. But if everyone was good at it, why are we still talking about it? I think there's just more to it.
Why is it not nature?
Yeah. And I think Lona's really highlighted that well.
Yeah, he was really honest about the differences of training men and women, and how moving into those environments, he had to level up and adapt and listen, and really listen, like really listen before he made decisions. That came across really clearly. You just don't hear that enough, I don't think.
No. Yeah, everyone wants to be the one making a decision or pushing forward rather than just taking a step back just to listen to what's going on. And the reason why I thought it was really profound that Lona's talked about this is because I know firsthand how much people think highly of him. Like, you know, if he's saying that coach's perception might not be what they think, like if you ask him, he'll be incredibly humble. But if you ask the athletes and the coaches that work around him, they'll sing nothing but high praises. So this is someone that has that listening ability, that communication ability. And he does it well. So I'm just like, okay, who talks a good game but doesn't do it well, compared to Loner's, who does do it well, because I've spoken to the athletes he works with and the people that he works with, and he is that good at it. So I think it maybe things will change in the near future of, you know, what communication, relationship building's good, but what are the key things that ultimately develop it?
Yeah. It's that passion for serving others as well, isn't it? That's the difference. That's I think that's come across in quite a few interviews. Like the passion for the long-term outcomes, not the short-term wins. Rob Anderson was another person that sort of demonstrated that with working with youth athletes. There's a long-term win here. You don't just get the short-term gain. You listen, you learn, you give them the best opportunity they can to move forward.
Rob Anderson is another coach that, you know, everyone speaks so highly about. The way he's worked his way within the Scottish Rugby Football Union, and the athletes that he's worked with to get them to the stage that they have, shows that he just has that ability as well.
Yeah. So let's jump into Ep 2. Bernie. You had a lot in common with Bernie. The impact of stress. And this is bigger than just performance and sport, isn't it? This is like getting the basics right at the life level. When you're not performing, how are you looking after yourself? How did that interview go? What did you take away from that one?
Well, I always knew that was going to be a difficult episode. And when I was listening back to the episode, I was like, I didn't really explain that well, just because the topic is difficult for me to talk about. I have no problem talking about it, but I still find it hard to talk about it. And so, yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to speak to Bernie, because I know we have similar backgrounds, and from that, you're always wondering, like, okay, this happened to me, but why? You always, want to understand a little bit more. So speaking to people like Bernie who have been through situations as well where, it just got a bit too much, allows you to maybe think a bit more deeply, because you just don't want to go back there. And then what made me what I thought was most profound was the discussion around high achievers.
Right.
Because I know it's what's good at the moment and popular on social media is how it is okay to not be okay. It's okay to be vulnerable sometimes and actually speak to people. However, it does seem the ones that need the most help are the ones that are most quiet. And you have a point where people will go, I'm fine, and then crash. There's no awareness of how the stress is building up. And it's very similar to training. So if you go week 1, you do some training, week 2, you do a little bit more training. Technically, you could progress linearly, just add a little bit more each week. But you don't. You probably have a deload week at some point just to make sure that you don't go over the top. And it's the same with life, but we don't view it the same. So you add more stress. And stress can, Bernie was very good at highlighting how stress comes in different forms. Add more stress, I'm fine, add more stress. And it's always, you're fine until you're not. And I think those are the people that need someone like Bernie, a health coach, just to give them the self-awareness to make sure that break doesn't happen. Because there's no point working so hard until you break. Let's just try and alter a few things. And they seem very subtle things that they alter, but those subtle things are going to have a profound effect.
Yeah. But she made out as well, like, it's not the last thing that makes you snap. It's a continuation of smaller things building up, and you need to look back to work out what the real stresses are. It's not going to be this one thing. It's always going to be multifactorial. There's always going to be several things pulling you in multiple directions. It's being aware of what's happening, like how are all these things piling up? And I thought that was a really good key point, because I think a lot of people just react to the last thing that caused them stress, as opposed to having a holistic view and reviewing, taking a second and having a look back.
People want that one thing to blame. So that last thing that happens, that was the thing. So you have something, it could be physical, but you can see it. I want to blame. That's my reason why I felt this bad now. When you're right, it's all those little things that add up. And because they're so little, you don't see their true effect. You don't see the sum of their parts, really, do you, of all those different stresses? I think she was right. Those high achievers, those that are constantly striving to do more and more and more because they have such high goals for themselves, because they're so focused on one thing, they don't see all that stuff piling up. So, what I really want to do is promote Bernie as a health coach, because if anyone's really struggling, like, really just go, give her a message, because she will work wonders. She'll work absolute wonders. So, and also one thing I liked about having that, it wasn't overly sporty. Yeah, we talked about exercise and, when you probably could or shouldn't do exercise because it could be good for you, or it could actually be worse for you. But it was a bit more away from the, like, okay, this is human performance, we're going to get better. This is, those softer review skills, which are important. Yeah,
I mean, high performance, you need to be able to sleep. And sleep is one of the things that gets affected the quickest when you're stressed. So you cannot improve. You cannot perform at your best if you are not sleeping. So I think that's just like the subtle link there with Bernie's stuff. And she alluded to it quite a lot. Like you need to be aware of all of the things in your life, because you can't push and do a run and then try and do all the family stuff and then try and work, because you've wasted your energy on a thing that wasn't going to really improve anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Really good. Where should we go next? Let's pick another episode. Ooh. Let's jump into Dr. Luke Hughes. I enjoyed this one because I'm always a fan of seeing a fad on Instagram. And you never know if it is a fad or if it is, something that can change your performance, something that can improve your life. And blood flow restriction was something I had no idea about, but I'd seen people like tightening up their little special t-shirts and stuff, and I didn't understand the method behind it.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating topic, isn't it? Because especially when it started to develop, this was years ago, people were starting to get involved, but they didn't have access to the stuff that they sell now. And I've seen people use like bike inner tubes to try and tie it around their arms, and it looks a bit, well, that's a bit much, isn't it? Are you causing damage there? Quite possibly was not, but quite possibly if they were doing it incorrectly, it could have done, but it just looks quite barbaric. So now things are being released, new pieces of equipment that you can readily available and you can buy. All of a sudden, loads of people are doing it, but it's like, oh, what's this? And then they'll look at it and see, check out that guy's veins. Get that on my arms.
It's so vascular. Oh.
And then, exactly. And then you see that and you think, okay, from a marketing perspective, they're trying to tap into those people that are like, I want big arms, I want to improve my size to help the way I look. Fine, that's all good. So automatically you think that someone that's marketed that way, how does that actually have any performance benefits? That's purely for aesthetics. And then you speak to Luke. That's just not the case. This has been utilized for a number of years within the medical profession, and it's only really now that it's starting to be used in performance. And I think that was one of the things that really stood out for me from a performance wise. So we always talk about this minimal dose effect. You want to do this amount of training that is enough to improve, that's going to improve your sporting performance. Anything above that level, then you could argue that it's junk volume. That could actually be increasing the amount of fatigue that you're experiencing, which could in turn lead to a decrease in performance.
Right, sure.
And then all of a sudden this thing comes along where, because you're not lifting as much, because when you've got the cuff on, you can only lift around 20 to 40% of what your perceived heaviest is. Mm-hmm. You're getting less mechanical damage, and but you're getting similar adaptations. From the hypoxic environment creates a very metabolic environment, which develops similar adaptations to if you were lifting very heavy. Now that must be great from a population where if you're injured, but if you think of it from a performance perspective, we're always looking for ways of athletes to do less training so they are more fresh to actually perform the sport that they need to do. Mm-hmm. So if you can utilize this to get a similar adaptation to lifting heavy, all of a sudden they wouldn't have to lift as heavy as often. They would recover more quickly, less fatigue, which then in turn means that they could be more fresh when actually if they've got a game at the weekend or some kind of event that's coming up.
And reduce injury.
Quite possible, especially. Well, yeah. I mean,
thinking more the fatigue. Performing under fatigue, you're at risk.
Yeah, certainly. Exactly that. Especially, a lot of the injuries that occur in sort of team sports, we seem to use that as an example at the moment, but they occurred during the last 20 minutes of a game. Those are those soft tissue injuries that have occurred because, the tissue itself is asked to do a certain amount of work and it's tired. So it's not functioning as well as it could. And then it just overstresses the tissue, and then it, I'm not saying it ruptures or anything like that, but those muscle strains, could then lead you getting into a poor position.
Probability increase, shall we say?
Yeah, exactly that. So if you had something that enabled you to do this less training, but with the same adaptation, you're going to jump on that, aren't you? You're going to absolutely jump on it.
Sure.
And sounds like the research isn't quite yet done on that, but it's really promising and it's heading in that direction. So, watch this space. And you never know. In 2 years' time, we might need to bring Luke back on the podcast, because blood flow restriction training research has just, exploded, and we know so much more. So that's something to look out for, I think.
So are you going to buy a device?
Oh, they're expensive. Because
come on,
one
you're
of
a
his
big
recommendations
podcast host now. Come on.
What I would like to do, if any of the big companies that do sell them want to get in touch and do a bit of a N=1 type of experiment that we could do together to actually show that your equipment works, I think that would be great. From Luke's recommendation, we want to use one that has a dial which shows how much pressure has been applied, because you technically want to
as well.
Exactly that. So what were the recommendations? So you've got 100%. It means you're stopping all the venous return, and then you want to then loosen it to around 70% of that. But really, if you're going to be accurate with that, you need some form of dial that shows what you're doing.
Definitely.
You can't just have bike inner tubes,
Just guessing.
So,
feels about right.
Yeah. Ooh, feels 70%. What does that mean?
Can you feel 70% of pressure?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure I can,
Oh, but this one's 50. Right, do it up more.
Awesome. That was a good effort. I enjoyed that one because it like directly spoke to something that I was seeing on Instagram. So let's jump into... It was a bit more sciencey. Yeah, it was sciencey.
It was a bit more sciencey, but he'd explained it so well, which I thought was great. Like, it was Luke's a great guy. So,
talking of explaining things well, segue. Steve Griffiths.
Yeah.
What a guy. I mean, this was another sort of along the lines of Bernie, maybe not directly sort of human performance in terms of actual performance, but mindset and beliefs, so important to anyone looking to improve their performance really outside of the game.
Yeah, it was great to get Steve on because, like I kind of said at the beginning of his episode, there's a lot of people that talk about mindset, but you've got a certain few that are just that cut above. And out of all my like close friends within the sort of strength and conditioning community, human performance community, they go, this guy, speak to this guy. He really knows his stuff. He really just makes you change the way you think. I was like, okay, so I've got to speak to this guy. So I got Steve on, really lovely guy. And it just enabled him, the way when he spoke, it just made you reflect and go, that just makes so much sense now. And then there's at times where, oh yeah, I do that. So I'm doing stuff without really knowing it. And he's kind of framing it in a way within beliefs, thoughts and emotions. And you're thinking, that makes complete sense. Because whenever I have a day or even to spare 30 minutes where I'm able to, let's call it, recenter yourself and make sure that you're reflecting on what you believe to be true, you feel so much better. You feel less anxious because everything feels laid out a bit more in front of you. And then he kind of explained why that happens. And that's never really been explained to me before. So the idea around, okay, you've got your beliefs. Those beliefs then affect your thoughts about them. And then your emotions are directly developed because of your thoughts. Well, that makes complete sense. And then you think, okay, if they're all stemming from your beliefs aren't facts. They are your perception of what you perceive to be true, and those can be changed. So if you just be aware of those beliefs, think, oh, I've actually perceived it in this way, but really that's not true. Or it doesn't have to be true. It could be true. It's only true at the moment because I perceive it to be true. Yeah. But I can change that. Then all of a sudden your thoughts about that thing are different, and then you have different emotions being developed. And that, that's surely, that's the base of everything. to me, I thought that's the base of everything.
But it's practical application. He was like using it to triage scenarios. If there was a stressful situation, you can look back and go, right, what is my belief about this? And then from there, he was distilling, how do I respond to this in the most effective way? And I think that's just so important for people, just to control your reaction, because you don't need to react the way you are. It might be the way it is, but you can react however you choose, depending on how you perceive your own beliefs. So powerful, really good.
Yeah, it was incredible. And you start to see, like, he does quite a lot of work with elite sports athletes. Like, he really does. He doesn't advertise it as much. It's kind of like, okay, you need to speak to this guy. Whereas, because he's a trader by, his profession. But he does this on top. But he's still speaking to elite athletes. So,
but it's in trading. They prominent traders, once you've placed your trade, it's out of your hands. You should be stressed before the trade, not once you've placed it. And that's the same process of that. You can't control it once you've done it. You can change your mind and pull your money out, but that's not the purpose of the trade. So it's about understanding, right, what are the risks before you do something. And then when you're in it, whether you're in the trade or you're in a game, you're in it. You can't change it now. You just have to react as best as possible to what's in front of you. Just controlling that emotion that way. Yeah. I like that one.
Yeah, it was a good one, wasn't it?
Another good one, Adam Mattiussi.
Yes.
Had no idea about ballet. I mean, what an insight. I can't believe the amount of training these dancers do. It's insane. That's insane performance. Because every rehearsal is almost as full on as a performance, right?
Pretty much. I mean, it would depend on dancer rank and how many productions are going on. But the way I saw it, and when I first learned about this, took a step back, and you can imagine the ballet dancers just thinking that's normal. Well, I've got to do it because I've got to practice for my performance. And then you get someone that's a coach and that programs different types of plyometrics, ballistic, jumping type activities, and then they look at that and think, whoa, that's insane. But to them it's normal, and that's the crazy thing. But when you really take a step back and think, okay, if they are jumping continuously for 6 to 8 hours a day, like, that just really highlights how important someone like Adam Mattiussi and his work in physically preparing these dancers for their shows. It just shows how important it is. And it's S&C support is well known for all sports, but yet it doesn't seem to be as well known for those with an artistic nature, like ballet. So it's like, okay, right, we're going to change this. Let's make sure everyone is aware of just how incredible these dancers are and how it's essential their physical preparation is. One other interesting fact they found, the reason it's come into my head is because I spoke to Adam on Thursday. The dancers are going away for a 4-week break, and they have to make sure that they give them training programs to do while on their break, because the time when they get a peak in injuries occurring at the Royal Ballet is when they return from holiday. So they've got all of this, all this dancing and practicing, and then all of a sudden they stop for 4 weeks. It's when they suddenly have to switch that back on that the injuries come about. So they just have to do enough while away to try and reduce the chance of shocking the body into like, what the hell is this? And they can just sort of resume back into it.
Well, there must be mental preparation as well to that, right? Being in that mindset of moving that way. I think if you just stop moving in certain ways, you don't remember how to, do the movement effectively and stuff. So it's mind and body, I guess, isn't it?
I guess it's that feeling of, I'm a bit rusty. but then you do the same at volume while feeling a bit rusty performing. Yeah, quite opposite. So yeah, that's why I particularly love that episode. And so I'm part of Adam Mattiussi's PhD team, and I love going down to the Royal Ballet to see him. I haven't done it too much recently because of COVID, but it's like, okay, we've got a PhD meeting, right, we're going to the Royal Ballet, aren't we? And it's just such a cool environment to see what they've got down there. You've got their rehearsal rooms, and sometimes they're performing on the stage, and then you go sort of upstairs, and then you've got, there's got the physios, you've got the rehabbers, people do certain Pilates things. They've got such a cool setup there. The sports science at the Royal Ballet is very, very good. So that's why they're the best in the world.
One of the best in the world.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I think that's a good little review of season 3.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every single episode was really, really good. I loved every single, and I learned so much from each one. So it just makes me even more excited for season 4, because we've got some great guests coming on as well already. We've got them all lined up.
Yeah, all lined up, ready to
recording.
Go. Can you tease any of the sort of topics that we're heading into in season 4?
Yes. So again, try to get a bit of a balance between the sort of the athlete side and people going for certain challenges, to the more sciencey side and finding or discussing certain scientific principles and how we can put them into practice. So from the athlete and adventure side, we have someone that's going for trying to climb the 14 highest peaks in the world. There's 14 mountains that are over 8,000 meters. So they're going to do that. And hopefully if they do it, they'll be the youngest person to ever achieve that and actually break the record by 7 years.
Nice.
So that's going to be impressive. And then someone else is coming that's doing to raise money for charity. They are running the Marathon des Sables and then rowing the Atlantic.
Wow.
So, huge events where it's like, okay, what training are you doing? And then what's your mental preparation? Because we want to know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, definitely. So
that's more the sort of like adventure athlete side. And then we've got a few topics from more the science side. We've definitely we're going to be talking about hybrid training, the ability to train for both strength and endurance at the same time. Another one on the, maybe a fad. Got someone talking about compression garments.
Yep.
Which was a good one. We've actually already recorded that one. That was wicked. And training in the heat is coming up as well.
Interesting.
I'm looking forward to that. I really find environmental physiology fascinating. So during season 4, I just think it's a huge limiter that people forget.
Right, sure.
And I always think that people are really interested in seeing the extremes. So if you think of the extremes in terms of what an athlete can do in an environment, you think in high altitude, high pressure, so really underwater, very hot, very cold, in space. So I'm like, okay, all of those are just fascinating. It's like, how does the body react into it? Because, we see people push themselves to the limits during sport, but then what happens if you try to do that at the extremes of the environment? Like, it's a different ball game. That's why I find it fascinating. So we're going to do some discussions around training in the heat. And hopefully we'll be also at some point do all of the other extremes as well.
Nice. You like to do this at the end of the podcast, so I'm going to do it to you. Oh. Who would you like to have on the progress theory before the end of season 4?
When I ask this question, it always throws people out a bit. They're like, "Oh right, I really got to think about that."
Now you can feel their pain.
And now I've had it. Now I know exactly how it feels.
I have to edit this normally.
One person did say The Rock, and I'd love to interview The Rock, just from his ability to manage, communicate, and his mindset around
he's a positive vibe guy,
achieving goals. Positive vibe guy. And, not many people have interviewed him. Normally, the top people in their field have usually ended up on the Joe Rogan podcast. But he hasn't yet. So I reckon
So you want to beat Joe Rogan to it?
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you need to send him. Hey, can we beat Joe Rogan? Can you just jump on the progress theory for me?
Yeah. If we're thinking like anyone, I guess Rock would be anyone. Okay, Roger Federer is my hero. So let's get Feds on.
He might be available in between tournaments.
He might be available now. But, just see what he's done to try and make sure that he's kept his body in shape to compete at Wimbledon. He's 40 next month, which is, insane. More from him because I think he's the GOAT because he changed the culture of the sport. So there were, incredibly successful tennis players before him, but no one had that cultural impact like Federer did. No one was that dominant. Now it's expected of people to be that dominant at the top.
Yeah.
He changed all of that, to be that dominant over so many different surfaces. He would be nice. He would be someone that would be really good. In terms of science, I'd love to do Brian Cox. Interview Brian Cox. I mean, it's not so much human performance, but that's me being selfish. Speaking of environmental physiology, there's a professor at Portsmouth Uni called Professor Tipton, who's done a lot in terms of certainly athletes in the cold. I saw a lecture from him years ago, but I think he would be really cool to have on. So
to counterpoint your heat, yeah,
and I think he'll be wicked. He'll be really knowledgeable. Beautiful
stuff. Well, I think you've done famously. Season 3 has been an absolute success. Thousands of downloads, lots of people engaging. I'm looking forward to season 4.
Yeah, and thank you for doing such an amazing job producing this show. Like, it really adds the finesse to it. Ultimately, when we started working together, I really didn't want that interview style, and having a producer helps with that immeasurably, because not only are you giving me instructions, but at the same time, the editing, even though it's conversational anyway, it feels more conversational the way it's edited as well. So it's exactly what I wanted to do. So thank you so much, Matt.
You're very welcome. Onwards and upwards, mate.
Exactly. I can't wait. It's going to be good.
See you for the next season review.
Will do. See you then.